So I'm Chris Tolles. I'm the CEO and a co-founder of Topix. We launched in 2004 as a local news aggregator, or as actually a general purpose news aggregator, and we found out that no one was really doing a great job nationwide for news for every little town in the country. So we focused on the local side, and then on top of that, we started building the ability for people to have conversations about those towns and about those subjects. And so now we're about 12 million Comscore uniques. We're profitable. We've been around, again, since 2004, and it's going pretty well. We monetize through advertising, and we have tried everything. I think there's every single thing that you can do in trying to monetize local advertising, from starting local sales forces to having a direct sales force into large agencies to every single kind of partnership that you could possibly imagine. So it's just horrifying. And it's an interesting mix, but we figured out that mix of things is to be what we found to work.
Terrific. Okay, Ben, if you can, you started this new company, AdGlue, but before that, you started Sacramento Press, which is an independent hyperlocal site. So if you could give us a little background there on, the site, and then how you decided to get AdGlue going from there.
Sure. Well, I'm going to just say, first of all, for AdGlue, we started it because we all worked at the Sacramento Press. So we saw a lot of the same issues that other independent local publishers saw, and we wanted to start addressing some of them. And of course, selling advertising and having happy advertisers was really one of the top issues for hyperlocals. But as we started talking to other people in other spaces, we found this to be true across the board. So you talk to major newspaper companies, finding similar problems, and even Google, we found the same problem. One of our top problems was, where is my ad? Where does it show up? And do I get to see it? And what we would do at Sacramento Press is we'd actually have an intern go through and refresh a page a number of times until they saw the ad, take a screenshot, and email it to the advertiser. And I'm lucky enough to have connections here and in the Valley and talk to some people at Google, and they said, that's actually one of our top customer complaints too. We do a really good job at exposing the ad to the right audience. We don't do a very good job of communicating that success back to the advertiser. And so AdGlue is dead simple. We just thought it'd be fun if an advertiser had the ability to click a button next to an article they like and see their ad pop up right next to the article they like, and it'll run there for 30 days. And it'll be obvious to them where their ad is, and then we'll make sure to take care of run-of-site advertising, highly targeted advertising, programmatic advertising, to make sure that the whole campaign is successful. But there's a piece of the campaign through AdGlue that they get to glue themselves where they can be involved, and it's a totally crazy thing to do, because we're actually asking small businesses to do something extra, which, as you'll find out, is like impossible, almost as impossible as selling the product in the first place. So that's how we got there, and I'm really proud of Sacramento Press. We're always experimenters, and actually Sacramento Press without me is better. They are profitable last month, so that's always great.
Okay, so I think, I know that one of the things that, and you've been talking about it, that you like to talk about really is the contextual stuff, and I know you definitely have a different view on it. But if you can just talk a little bit more, because that's a hard business to scale. So if you can get into that further, and then I want to hear what Chris has to say
Independent
about it.
hyperlocals is an impossible business to scale, and some other firms have found that out. Recreating that special thing that a local journalist, blogger, owner-entrepreneur of one of these independent locals is doing, that is very, very difficult. And Tracy Records and Susan Murnitz, the Oakland locals and the West Seattle blogs, they do not grow on trees. These are things that take an enormous amount of work and dedication, and they only work, as right now, for those very small scale. That may change, but for me, it's about surrounding those people with tools so that they can do what they do and make more money. It's not about trying to replicate that and making it a business in a box, because every community is different, and these hyperlocals rely on that fact to fill in the cracks in their particular communities better than a large business possibly could. That's their advantage. So I'm still very involved in Lion, which is the local independent online news publishers association, and I'm really passionate about those people who dedicate their lives to doing this, even though it's never going to be a big business. That's not why they even do it in the first place.
Okay, Chris, I know you have pretty much a different view from that.
I guess certainly we've proved what it takes to scale that type of business, which is what Patch has done. They spent $160 million to get there, and unlike most large media efforts run by companies not in that business, they've got something to show for it. They have 18 million ComScore uniques. So it isn't currently profitable, but we know what it takes to scale it, which is a very large amount of money. So it's not impossible, but you do have to have, the scale that AOL puts against it, they're making, what, $30 or $40 million a year. So, according to them, they'll at some point in time break even the next year or two. That might end up being a great revenue generator down the line. The issue right now, I think, is that the ad dollars, you've got the local business guys who, they kind of want to, they still want to feel the paper in their hand at the end of the day. One of my favorite stories, the Daily News guys, did a startup newspaper, and they're like, we're not going to build a website. Websites are bad. You want to sell print, because people don't know how to value it, so I can sell it for a lot of money. I'm like, well, that's a good idea. It turns out that the problem here is the measurement. All that stuff to provide value to the advertiser is being used against the publisher. So the context isn't really being factored in. And at a larger scale, ad agencies, they don't want context. They want to see the audience. They're buying audience. They want to buy a cookie. They want to buy someone who went to the Walmart store before they came to your site. And that stuff, context is completely irrelevant. And so when you're trying to put that mix onto your site, you say, hey, I've got local context. And the agency is pretty much like, yeah, whatever. Really what I want is to see how this works onto my platform. So I think it depends on how you're going to do it. But scaling up that local ad sales thing, yeah, it's extremely expensive. And so far those people just aren't great customers. The only people who've won here, everyone's going to piss on Groupon, but man, those guys were the first people to come up with a model that worked after the Yellow Pages to the point of making a huge amount of revenue quickly. So I think that's the issue. Is it's not about context, it's about giving value to the small business or the larger business guys.
Yeah, and I think one of the things here is that, it's a little bit about automation, right? And so using that to, really create some good ways of scaling up, right? You're taking that approach to extent.
Actually, I want to back up a little bit, because there's a couple things Chris said that I have a slightly different opinion about. Look, for example, Patch. And I know some of the people who work there, and I love them, and they're great, but they have lost and consistently lost $100 million plus, and they are still losing money. And so until they figure it out, and they have some of the best people in the business to figure it out, I still consider it something that's impossible or extremely difficult to scale. And when they prove me wrong, and I hope they do, then that'll be fantastic, because I think that we do need more voices in these local media ecosystems, and they'd make a great addition. But until they're sustainable, again, like a Tracy Record is sustainable, then I discount a lot of what they're doing. The other issue is really paper in hand, right? That's about perceived value. Groupon success, customers coming in the door, that's about perceived value, even though those customers were worth potentially nothing to many of these small businesses and costing them money in some cases. In other cases, it's a great value, but it just depends on what kind of business you do. Are you a dentist or are you a coffee shop? It depends on your ticket price and how much you can bring people back in. But in both of those cases, those are businesses and business models that are about perceived value. The advertiser feels it. And in both cases, the advertiser collaborates in the process of creating the pitch, creating the ads, servicing that contract. It takes a little extra effort, but the perceived value for the advertiser is higher than some of these kind of larger, more programmatic buys that the agencies do. And so if you want to go after those customers, I think you have to put them front and center. What do you need? But also have them help craft that identity for themselves. If you can do that, they'll believe in what they're doing with you.
I guess the aspect is who has the money. And so right now, it's much easier to get money from if you're running a site that actually has some amount of traffic, from a programmatic buyer, which is going to be an agency. And so I agree with you. Generally, what the agency is providing back to the advertiser is a proxy for value. They're providing, like, we got to these many people that we told you was who you should reach. Now, whether or not that's a good message or whether that's useful to the advertiser is much like the Groupon purchase. It's not completely clear. But the advertiser wants to get to that audience, or rather the agency wants to get to that audience, and they have the scale to actually put cash into your site. From a truly local standpoint, they don't have agencies representing them, but they've got the Yellow Pages selling into them, and the Yellow Pages will say, hey, phone calls will come to you, the perceived value point that you're bringing up, and then you have to provide something back to the advertiser, hey, what are you going to provide that? And in your case of Groupon, it's people coming into the store. But page views and clicks aren't things that they necessarily value. So what is it that you're going to provide? And brand value is something that's hard for them to measure. So what are you going to provide them, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, what we do is we built the system around, it's a really small, tiny little piece of value, but when you click the button and you see your ad, that's that same feeling of the ad in hand, that print ad in your hand. It's the idea that you get a small rush of excitement. And then the next piece is programmatic, which is, look, we know you don't have an agency, so we're going to track the behavior of users on this site, and we're going to help you target the right content next time. We know that the first 10 things you buy are probably not going to be the exact right 10 articles to buy. So the next question is, can we make a recommendation based on 3 of the articles being the right articles and 7 of the articles being the wrong articles?
Well, the other issue here about advertising, if you're doing local, how many of you are actually are from are publishers of some sort, where you actually are trying to get advertisers to come onto your site? And how many of you are advertisers or some sort of advertising technology platform trying to provide things there? So I mean, I think that's where the contention is, because for the most part, as a publisher, there's no way you can compete in terms of share of market the way it used to be. There was 2 newspapers, 3 TV stations, and 2 radio stations in your town, and your share of market was very high. So you could actually have a little bit of negotiating room with the advertiser. Now, with these bidding platforms and so forth, to a medium or larger advertiser, they're going to go up to 1 billion impressions and try to get to more people than you could possibly focus on. And so when you're going to go out there, that's going to be really the challenge right now. So it's going to be, even for a large newspaper, we have 3 newspaper investors. Even for them, it's difficult for them to provide scale, though they have the sort of halo effect of having been around for 100 or 200 years. So that's something where you're going to go to the Chicago Tribune. They might have 20% share of voice in Chicago, but people go, oh, it's the Chicago Tribune. And if you're coming in from an online standpoint, you're coming up with your publisher at the Sacramento Voice, or us, who actually has a fairly large amount of traffic. It's still something where you're going to be fighting uphill, and it's going to be something where you have to prove value programmatically back to the. You have to give them a report that says, hey, I reached all these people. But it still doesn't give you that feel of goodness. It's like, oh, I've seen your ad in the Chicago Tribune. So, yeah, there's that. Yeah,
I mean, I think you definitely need both. And I think that one of the biggest strengths that these same publishers we're talking about have, and even Topix has, they have great communities still. They may think of it in terms of we have great content, but really they have wonderful audiences. If you measure the affluence of that audience, they still are good targets themselves. And so you do see the rise of private networks, and I think that's extremely important in collecting your own data as publishers in order to leverage your data so that the programmatic ad buys can be better targeted against your audience than those on an open market using third-party data. And if you can provide that right, we've seen average CPMs go up. But obviously, that's one part of what we're talking about. That's a lot of remnant. If you're a big publisher, you've got a bunch of house-sold ads. And then what we're trying to do with AdGlue is give you one more layer that's a premium, one more piece that can help your connection with your best advertisers. And the funny thing is that advertisers, they are a part of that community. We recognize, for example, that our distribution is now through social media. So it's our readers who are now distributing our content as well. And we also recognized a long time ago our readers could participate in the creation of content. That's a lot of what Topix is about. And now we're trying to say, can advertisers be part of that community? Do they have a button to click? How do they interact with the site?
Okay, so wait, on that point of the premium, what is the premium level that you guys offer your advertisers? I mean,
so when we work directly with someone, we have a couple of large banks that have worked directly with us in the recent past. We do provide the same argument. We provide a contextual argument. And the thing is, I guess there's no logic in large ad buying. None. Like it's the kind of thing where if you're for example a retailer and you're trying to get people feet on the street, you can't. There's no way to measure that, so they create a proxy. They create something that they're all going to believe will work. And then you can't logically improve upon that because you're not given the tools as a publisher to help them. So basically, you can sell against a context ad. In this case, what we were doing, our premium is, hey, we can go in there and, like the Chicago Tribune or the LA Times or the Arizona Republic, we could say, hey, why don't you buy us as the number 2 buy after you're buying all these other local papers? Because if you look at the way the deduplication works in ComScore, you're going to get to all these people you didn't get to through that buy. So it's a good if your proxy is to reach a set of local audiences, we're a great buy from that standpoint. Many agencies are not looking to provide that, but if they've created a model where getting to a set of local audiences works, that's where the newspapers, TV stations, and us work out pretty well. But it's interesting that not everybody, that it's just an arbitrary model. We're going to choose local. Why are you doing that? And there's not a logical model to choose local or a logical model to choose retargeting as much as they think, oh, we're going to proxy this, that we want people to have been to that site before. Now, in some cases, if you're doing e-commerce, you can actually measure an effect. But a lot of times it comes down to the agency just chooses something they can model easily. And that's the part where if they've decided to model on local, we fit in great. So the premium is we can provide a contextually relevant, highly engaged experience. Our time on site's good. But the problem here is that you can't prove that it does anything to you. It's very subjective. And so it comes down to you're hoping that the agency is amenable to a local argument if you're a local site. But they might also be like, hey, it's all about retargeting. We don't care. We're going to go to an RTB status. Or they're going to say, hey, I want to reach the most people for the least amount of money. I don't care about any of this context. That's the frustrating part. And then the other piece is that they don't give you enough information to improve it. It's like, hey, what do you want them to do? You want them to click on your ad? Well, can we change the ad format? Can we do something? And pretty much they keep their cards close to their chest, so you don't know how to help them. And that's something that's also frustrating. Because before, if you had a direct relationship with the advertiser, you can actually go, hey, are we doing some good? What can we do? And that interactivity loop is very difficult as a publisher these days because the agency is essentially a knowledge prevention entity between you and the advertiser. And that's frustrating. Now, again, from their standpoint, they want to provide value, and they're reserving some of that value for themselves. But our premium value is just what he's saying. Is that we provide a very contextual, highly engaged local experience, and then hopefully someone actually wants that.
Okay, so we just have a very little time left, but one of the big differences here really does come down to you're talking a lot about local businesses, you're talking about agencies, and why is one approach better than the other? I want to know specifically why, because you've clearly made a decision there, both of you, to do one other than the other.
Going after local businesses requires a local sales force or a self-service mechanism that works really well. Google built that by step one, build the largest search engine in the world. Step two, go after local businesses. Good plan. If you're Yelp, it's go raise $100 million. Don't worry about profitability. Create a cool service. Go public. Still not profitable. Good plan. If you are instead building a content business, for example, let's say Patch. Let's go off and build a set of 1,000 local little newspapers, and now we're going to go after the local businesses around them. Well, it does work. It just isn't, as we've all pointed out, profitable yet. But most people try to do this, and they build up little, they have one little newspaper and it works, like Howard Owens, the Batavian, or Susan Murnan over in Oakland. But as soon as you get to 10 or 11 of these things, it starts to fall apart. So the other side of it is you're someone like us, and we're a bunch of carpetbaggers, and we're like, what can we do? We're going to put out news everywhere, and then we're going to try to get money for that. And it turns out that going after large, scalable monetization efforts worked out better for us. So, we're not Yelp, but we're also not Patch. We're profitable, we're growing, life is good. So I guess that's what it comes down to is efficiency. It's easier to go to the people with the money. It's like what Dillinger said.
Great. Okay. And you're
I just want to say, look, you're absolutely right. And at big scalable, that's totally true. And for Howard Owens, at tiny, that's absolutely true too. And I think the other people who play in this and where we fit is we just want to be technologists. We just want to build tools that help both the very small and especially the very big. And we have to start with making partnerships with people that do have large sales forces, because I'm not going to build a sales force that goes out and pushes this product. So we have to work with publishers who have two things: really great content that people would want to glue, and a great large sales force. And it's a challenge to be in my space too, because those are slower moving organizations. But at the end of the day, if nobody's looking out for them and building technology for them, they may not be here much longer. So they need advocates, and they need tool makers, and they need all the people from the Valley to come to them as well. That's where we're trying to play.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Everyone, lunch is next, and I want to remind you of the stand-up act in the Gateway Room over there at 1:15. And bless you. And so lots of place for food and eating. There's food in the Sansom room and also the Fairlawn room behind you. Thanks so much. Thanks, guys.